If you want to make use of ancient Indian wisdom, want to benefit from it, want to understand what is it trying to tell us, are there anything useful things for us, and if we get into this journey of really start looking at ancient Indian wisdom, then we will encounter a certain kind of a problem, because we operate from a certain mental model and a certain paradigm. Ancient Indian wisdom, the knowledge representation is very unique. Unless we understand it, sometimes we may end up with something very different, or we may come with conclusions which are not necessarily what they are originally intended for. Now, what are these aspects of this knowledge representation which sets it apart, about which we should know and appreciate? First, the first thing we need to understand is the whole body of knowledge called this ancient Indian wisdom. There has been a greater desire to provide what I call it as Sukshma Tattva and not Stula Tattva. Stula is gross. On the face of it, you read it, translate it into English or whatever language, and that's it. That is called Stula. It is superficial or on the surface. Sukshma essentially is that which you need to reflect, you need to think in many different ways, you need to stretch the possibilities of what it can actually convey, then it may give something. If you take Bhagavad Gita shlokas, I was actually in another video I have mentioned this. You can read a shloka, get a certain kind of a meaning, but then one can get very different, even more than what we saw at the outset. So first we must understand that reading ancient Indian wisdom, we must be ready for looking for the sukshma, which means more effort, more out of the box, if I have to use a common word like that, approach. No preconceived assumptions, this is what is being told there, because there may be more than what meets the eye. So this is the first thing that we need to understand. The second thing is this ancestral wisdom called ancient Indian wisdom. I have a feeling it is not just about India. Maybe the Eastern paradigm might be of this same pattern. There is a greater desire to capture things from an intuitive and a reflective mind rather than an analytical mind. See, one can look at a particular piece of knowledge from an analytical bent of mind, or one can look at it from a very intuitive and a reflective mind. In fact, this is related to the previous point. If you get more intuitive and reflective, the sukshma will come, not the stula. Let me give an example so that we are able to understand. There is one shloka in Mundaka Upanishad. I picked up this shloka because very similar descriptions are there in many other Purusha Sukta and Rudra. In many places I see. This shloka goes like this: Agnir Murda Chakshushi Chandra Suryau Dishakshrotre Vag Vivritascha Vedaha Vayuhu Prano Hridayam Vishwamasya Padbyam Prithvi Hyesha Sarva Bhutantaratma. This describes a cosmic personality. So, in its effort to describe the cosmic personality, it says what are the ears, what are the eyes, the lower limbs, upper limbs. That's what this shloka is. So, it starts by saying Agnir Murdha. The Murdhni is the temple, this forehead. So, it says Agni is the forehead. Let's first try to translate it into English. Then it says Chakshushi Chandra Suryav. The two eyes are sun and the moon. Then it says Shrotre Disha Shrotraha. The directions are its ears. Vag Vivritascha Vedaha. All the Vedas are its speech. Vayuhu Pranaha. The wind is its prana, and so on. Let's look at one part of it. Chakshushi Chandra Suryo. Now, first of all, if you try to translate it in English, at best you will say this is a bundle of nonsense. Because what are we talking? Eyes are sun and moon, directions are ears, it makes no sense. Secondly, let us bring an analytical frame of mind. Even if you agree eyes are sun and moon, the analytical bent of mind will ask which eye is the sun and which eye is the moon. Right eye or left eye. In fact, in many other of descriptions, it says Soma Surya Agni Lochana. So there are three now. Fire, sun, moon. So the two eyes, and there is supposedly an eye in the forehead. So now the question is the 3C1 combination. Where is Agni, where is Surya, and where is Chandra? This is what will happen if you analytically understand this knowledge. Let's look at the Sukshma. Let us synthesize something more. What will happen if the whole world is pitch dark? Absolutely no source of light. The whole world is pitch dark. The whole world is pitch dark, then the two eyes are of no use. In fact, a blind person would be at an advantage because he or she anyway knew how to deal with, whereas I would find it difficult. In other words, the two eyes are of no use if this whole world did not have light at all. Now the question is, what is the source of light? First of all, the source of light for the whole world is sun. And there are two derived sources out of it, which is the moon and the fire. Because everything is related to sun at the end of the day. So therefore, this shloka is saying the presiding deity of the eyes are sun and the moon. And through that, it is trying to remind us that but for sun and moon, this faculty called eyes have no meaning. Now everything will fall in place. Disha Shrotraha. The ears are the direction. What is it suggesting? It is saying if there is no ether, if there is no space, sound waves don't travel, and if it doesn't travel, then this ear is of no use. So one can explain all this. I don't want to get into the details of this, but the point I am trying to make is intuitive understanding of this concept and the Sukshma Tattva can only bring it. Otherwise, most of the ancient Indian wisdom, I would agree with anybody, is plain nonsense, because if you translate it in English and say here is a cosmic personality, the two eyes are sun and the moon, the directions are these cosmic personalities' ears, I will say this is time pass. What is making sense here? In fact, if you look at anything, number of stories, Puranas, this whole body of knowledge is styled along this direction. Let's take one popular example, an emotional part in Mahabharata. The five brothers lose themselves in the gamble. They lose their Draupadi also. Draupadi is brought to the court, and Duchadan does what is called Draupadi Vastra Apaharana. You read that story. Again, what it says is Duchadan was trying to disrobe this lady, but then it keeps coming and coming and coming. The first question for an analytical mind is, how is it possible? What is the manufacturing lead time for this cloth to be manufactured and woven around Draupadi? Because these questions will all make this whole episode a laughing stock. Now that episode is not meant for it. In fact, for most part of ancient Indian wisdom has this structure. That episode brings the value of taking the hands off. If we know how to take our hands off, help will come. We will be much relieved. And that's one part of the story. One has to get into more detail. The point I am trying to make is this entire body of ancient Indian wisdom will read like this. Therefore, trying to simply translate it into English and try to look at it would give us a conclusion. This is a set of uninteresting, illogical piece of knowledge. What are we going to do with that? So this is the second aspect of unique knowledge representation which we must be aware of. The third, for the most part of it, in fact there are two ways to create knowledge. One is data driven and evidence driven. That's one way. Another way is logical and or intuitive reasoning. You don't need data and evidence, but you can use logic and intuitive understanding and come with an idea. In fact, the Western paradigm to a large extent is on this side. Data driven, evidence. In fact, the entire health systems, knowledge, understanding of diseases and solutions and how do you handle health comes from this direction. Whereas most part of ancient Indian wisdom comes from the other side. It's very logical set of ideas and intuitive reasoning. So one has to understand it is coming from a very different direction. In fact, the most shining example is the treatment of psychology. There is this waking state, there is this dream state, dreamless sleep, and there is a turiya avastha called samadhi. In fact, Western psychology, beyond waking state, they have not been able to go much even on dreaming. So a lot of knowledge have come from intuitive reasoning, sound logic with which one can argue. We need to understand that part. The last part which makes ancient Indian wisdom very different is, see, if you look at knowledge, if you look at the motivation to create knowledge, there are two ways you can ask. One is, about anything you can ask a why part. Why or what? Why and what are a little related. Or one can ask a question who. Just to give you an example, when the apple fell, Newton actually asked why did it fall? And because he asked why did it fall and he contemplated deeply on it, he discovered the force of gravity. If only Newton, as somebody was saying, I heard somebody saying this, if only Newton, instead of asking why or what, had asked who fell this apple, he would have got a different answer. Maybe he would have become a Brahmajnani, as the other person was saying. So the who question makes you very reflective, very intuitive. It makes you very internally focused. It provides a certain paradigm of life. Whereas the why and what part of it is very externally focused. So when the who question is asked, sometimes you can get the what and why also. When you ask the what and why question, the who answer will never come. Ancient Indian wisdom, for some reason, has taken a position to predominantly ask the who, and as a part of answering that who, there is a what and why which has also come. So we need to appreciate this. If we don't look at these aspects, and if we don't understand these governing principles by which knowledge has been created, knowledge has been preserved, knowledge has been presented, we may find it very difficult to make any sense of ancient Indian wisdom. So this is an issue which I think we must deeply again reflect, contemplate and keep in our mind when we dive deep into ancient Indian wisdom.